Hello and welcome. Today I've got these set of wheels that I'd like to service, specifically replacing the ball bearings inside the hubs. So these are XT M738 for the front and M739 for the rear. This video will be relevant for quite a few cup and cone styled hubs from the past and up until recently. Shimano are still using cup and cone loose ball bearings. Now obviously in the past there's the exception of some hub manufacturers that were using cartridge styled bearings inside their hubs, and obviously more recently now it's become a lot more prevalent, so that this video will not be useful for you. But if you're still using cup and cone styled loose ball bearings, this video is relevant. We're going to begin by working on the front and then the rear hub. We're going to be replacing the ball bearings inside, and we're going to be adding on new grease. So let's begin. So on these particular hubs, there's a seal to remove. We're going to remove the two nuts on this side of the hub. You want to avoid removing both sides, as it will be annoying when you're going to be adjusting everything later on. You're going to want to have a wrench that's thin enough to go onto the second inner nut. So for this hub, it's going to be a number 13 on the inner nut and then 17 on the outer. If you haven't got any wrenches, actually, you could quite easily look up on Shimano's website, as they pretty much have not the manuals, diagrams of their hubs dating back nearly 30 years, and it'll tell you the sizing. Sometimes they're 14, I believe, as well on the inner nut, so it really does depend, and other hub manufacturers can be 15. It all really depends. And we'll be removing them anti-clockwise. We're going to use the number 13 to hold the inner nut, and then the number 17 to actually undo the first nut. I do want to point out that it's easier to work on these hubs with the wheel standing up than flat down, because it will avoid the bearings falling out completely when you're going to be removing the main axle. Okay, so now we've removed the last nut that has also on the other side the cone. Now what's really interesting actually on this hub is previous hubs, if I remember, the main axe was going through towards the end, and the threading part was sticking out, and the bike was actually sitting on this threading, and the threading got damaged. Now I'm going to use a magnet to remove the bearings. Now since I'm going to replace the ball bearings, it's not a big deal, but if you're using a magnet, you're going to magnetize the bearings, and they're going to start sticking to each other, and it's going to be annoying when you're going to put this all back together again. So unless you're replacing your bearings, you'll want to do this manually using some sort of pick to take them out. You can remove this cover, and it's going to give you better access to the hub. Now be careful, because these are fairly thin walled, and you can easily bend them if you don't take them out, well, at least gently. So they're I'm going to take them off using a flat-headed screwdriver. That should do the job. This one came out fairly easily, and so did that one. Now you can observe for pitting on the interior as well as on the cone as well. Now, if it's extremely pitted, I guess you could consider replacing these. If you've got more vintage hubs, you're probably not going to do that. I do know that if you use some copper-based grease, I believe, it somehow fills up the pitting and, well, it gives a bit more efficient hub once you've applied that type of special grease. We're going to be using normal one. Now I can see on my one it's fairly smooth and there's no pitting. So normally I wouldn't really replace the bearings, but since I've got some, I want to do it anyway. For ball bearing sizing, if you have a ruler like this, you can quickly check, and you'll see here it's 3/16 of an inch, translated into millimeters, 4.76. Otherwise you can use, if you've located the diagram of your hub, it should indicate on the diagram the ball bearing size. For ball bearings, I'm not an expert on the subject. Generally, from what I've seen, the metals used are steel, stainless steel, ceramic, carbonized hardened steel, which is the more expensive stuff. You're going to notice that there's a grade for bearings. The grade is going to determine how round the bearing is, and if you're working on higher-ended hubs, I think Shimano, for example, Dura Ace hubs are going to be something like grade 20. So I aimed for the closest thing I could find. It's pretty hard to find a low quantity amount of high grade ball bearings from a reputable manufacturer. In the end, I ended up getting these from Wheels Manufacturing that are made in China. But at least I can feel a bit more positive on their real true grade. Avoid buying stuff from Amazon or AliExpress, as I think that a lot of the sellers are selling you low graded stuff and they're labeling it as higher graded. So this was the smallest quantity I could find, which was just 150. It came up to around about €10, I think, for this this tube. I did find some manufacturers, ball bearing ones in France, but the minimum quantity for the order was 10,000, which is way too many for me. For grease, on the rear hub I'm going to use Motorex FET 2000, and on the front hub I'm going to use some Finish Line teflon grease. If you don't have access to these greases, you can use Marin grease or any lithium based grease. I prefer Marin grease. It's fairly accessible. You can buy it in any supermarket or DIY shop for very, very cheap. And I've used it on a few hubs, and it's very, very good as well. Just not as good as these, but nearly as good. I've been very lucky that my hub is fairly clean, so I'm just going to wipe off the old grease. Make sure in yours that you fully remove all the old grease and any particles that are inside, as you want to avoid it recontaminating the new grease that you're going to put in. So I'm going to put now some grease on both sides of the hub. Let's put back these covers now on each side. You'll see that these covers don't completely sit inside. Use either a piece of wood. I'm going to use this mallet that I've got and just gently tap it in. We can now pop in our ball bearings, remembering 10 on each side. You'll notice at the end that there is a spacing. That's normal. Some people make the mistake of adding on an extra ball bearing. In fact, I think I did that myself. And no, you don't want to add on an 11th one. It's you need a bit of spacing in between the ball bearings. If you add on an extra one, it will obviously not be so efficient and won't roll properly. Let's add on a bit of grease now on the top of the bearings, and we'll work them in using one of the cones. We're going to now put the axe through and start tightening up. You can tighten this up, but not too tightly yet. We're going to add on the second and last nut. On some wheels, you'll have these washers that will have a kind of like a tab, and you'll need to put that into the right place, the tab for it to hold. On this one specifically, there isn't. And finally, the adjustment of the lock nuts. Same procedure when removing, except we're going to be doing the reverse. However, this time we're going to need to adjust the two lock nuts so that the bearings run smoothly, and at the same time there's absolutely no play. Now, the amount of time that you're going to spend on this is going to be determined by the amount of pitting, at least from my experience, on the cup and cone. If it's very rough, you're going to spend quite a considerable amount of time to get it just right so that it runs fairly smoothly and that there's no play. So I'm going to adjust mine now. I think it's going to be fairly easy, but we'll see. So you want something to hold on the other side, and you'll want to put one wrench on the inner nut here to get it just tight, and then once we've done that, we then tighten up the last nut here against the inner nut here. Anyway, I'll show you how to do that. So here I put the number 13 on the inner nut. On the other side, I'm going to put the number 17 on the outer nut just to hold it in place. So I do that until it's nice and smooth, but not too smooth. And then we're now going to tighten these two together. So I'm fairly satisfied here. It's nice and smooth and nice and tight as well. You definitely don't want it too tight, because when you're going to be using this again, it's going to wear much faster if the bearings are too tight against the cup and cones. But also you need to remember when you're going to put, at least on this one, there's going to be a quick a skewer that you're going to put through here, and it's going to put a tiny bit more pressure on here as well. So it's not too important if it's fairly loose, as long as there's no play really is what you're trying to aim for. Oh, and finally, you'll know that there's no play if you hold the two axes together. There shouldn't be any movement. It's even more obvious though when you're going to install it on the wheel, and you'll again move the rim left to right, and there you'll really feel it. It's much more obvious. Finally, the seals, they did seem to have a bit of grease on them when I was taking them off, so I'll put some back on. Let's work now on the rear hub. You can ignore the first part of the procedure, which is removing the cassette if you don't want to, in which case you're going to be removing the lock nuts from the other side, the non-drive side. I am going to remove my cassette though, so let's begin doing that. I've got quite a few of these tools to remove cassettes. I quite like this one from Decathlon though, because it has this little spindle part here that holds on to the that goes through the part where the skewer goes in. That one was quite hard to take off. So let's take the cassette from the through-wall body. Typically behind the cassette you will have hair or even string that you've picked up from the street, which I now have access to. There's actually a spacer on these free hubs that you can remove. There's going to be again another seal to take off. So as I mentioned for the front hub, you only want to take off one side. This evades having to readjust everything at the end when you're putting everything back together again, and you want to undo on the non-drive side as you have better access as well. Whereas if you begin on the drive side, you're not going to have access to the second lock nut. I'm not going to repeat the same information that I did for the front hub. The only difference for the rear hub is it's going to be a number 15 for the inner lock nut, and it will still be 17 on the outer. So let's take this off. Other side, same procedure. I'm going to remove the free hub to give it a bit of a clean, and also to have better access to the cup inside. So you're going to need a number 10 to take that off if you wish to do so. By the way, if your body needs to be replaced, you'll notice there'll be quite a bit of movement. You can still get these actually. They're not super expensive to replace, or you might be able to get one from another one. At the back of the body, you'll have quite a bit of hair that would have probably got caught up inside the part where there's a ball bearing, so I'm going to remove that. And I'm also going to take off or get rid of the grease that's on the interior on the cup. I'll clean also the reverse at the back here and on the other side. If you really want, at the back of the free hub, you can remove the seal that's right here. And if you want, you can either add grease or clean the bearings and then re-add some grease if you wish to do so. Just to give you a visual of what I've finally removed, quite a bit of hair and some string. Bit of WD-40 to remove some of that old grease. For ball bearings, I'm going to be using grade 25 again, and we're going to need 9 on each side, 18 in total, 1/4 inch ball bearings. And for grease, I'm going to be using some Motorex FET 2000, which is very similar to Shimano premium grease. I suggest you use something good like this actually, or otherwise you can use some lithium based grease. whatever you fancy. Let's put this cover back on. Let's screw the free hub body back on. And now put the bearings inside. Put some grease on the top of those. Don't think I put this in properly enough. Alright, now it's better. Now take the axle and the pod that's still stuck, where the lock nuts are still on that side, you're going to run that back through. Now grab the other lock nuts for this side and we're going to put them down. You can now put the spacers on if you've got some, and the final nut. Now there'll be one with one side with some grooves on it. That'll be the one facing outwards. Do the adjustment now. I didn't have the time to clean the cassette. I'll have to do that another time. Anyway, priority was the bearings. Right, well the hubs are spinning nice and smoothly. I hope this helped you service your Shimano, Campagnolo, whatever brand, front and rear hubs. Thank you for listening. Until next time.